They say love is a battlefield, and for me it was, but not in the way you'd think. It was a cold, calculated war, and I was winning, or so I thought. My husband, David, was a simple man, a good man even, but goodness doesn't pay for designer handbags, and it certainly doesn't buy a house in the exclusive suburbs of Dallas, Texas, where we lived. I was Samantha, and my life was a performance of perfection. A perfect house, a perfect car, and a husband who, from the outside, seemed to be providing it all. The truth was, David's paycheck was substantial, but not enough for my extravagant tastes. Not with the monthly mortgage payments and the luxury car leases. He worked as a software engineer, and his salary was the foundation of our life. But I wanted more than just a foundation. I wanted the whole castle. So, I took matters into my own hands. I subtly and carefully blocked a portion of his direct deposit, redirecting it to a separate, secret account. I used it to fund my shopping sprees, my fancy dinners with friends, and my relentless pursuit of a life I felt I deserved. "Honey, did you see the email from the bank?" David asked one evening, his brow furrowed as he stared at his phone. My last deposit was a little short. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly masked my panic with a feigned yawn. "Oh, probably just a bank error," I said, dismissively. "You know how they are. Just call them in the morning." He sighed, accepting my answer. The city lights of Dallas twinkled outside our large picture window, a million tiny stars that I felt I owned. He was a fool, a loving, hard-working fool, and I was the mastermind behind his struggles. I loved to watch him squirm, to see the confusion and frustration on his face as he tried to figure out what was happening to our finances. It gave me a twisted sense of control. "You're a bit of a mess with money, aren't you, David?" I'd say with a saccharine smile. "Maybe you should let me handle the finances. You just don't have the knack for it." He'd just nod, defeated, trusting me completely. He had no idea that I was the one creating the mess. Subscribe to the channel for the next chapter of this captivating story. You won't want to miss what happens next. Our life in Dallas was a series of carefully constructed illusions. I played the part of the devoted, supportive wife while secretly undermining my husband at every turn. David, with his kind eyes and gentle demeanor, was the perfect target. He was so focused on his work, on providing for us, that he never questioned my actions. The money I siphoned off wasn't a huge amount at first, just enough to cover my monthly splurges. But as my desires grew, so did the amount I took. My secret account became my source of power, my hidden treasure. I spent my days shopping at the most exclusive boutiques on McKinney Avenue, the vibrant heart of uptown Dallas. I'd come home with bags full of clothes I didn't need, and David would just shake his head with a tired smile. "Another one, Sam?" he'd say, gesturing to my purchases. "You're going to bankrupt us." "Don't be so dramatic," I'd retort, tossing the bags onto the chaise lounge. "I'm just living a little. You work hard. We deserve to enjoy it." He'd sigh and walk away, leaving me alone with my spoils. The frustration was a constant companion for him. He was a man drowning in quicksand he couldn't see, and I was the one pushing him down. The more I took, the more I noticed his anxiety growing. He started working longer hours, taking on extra projects, trying to make up for the money that was disappearing. He'd come home exhausted, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I just don't get it, Sam," he'd say, rubbing his temples. "I'm working my tail off, but we're barely staying afloat." "Maybe you're just not working hard enough," I'd say, my voice dripping with scorn. The words were cruel, but they were a test. I needed to see how much he could take, how much I could get away with, and every time he'd just absorb the blow, his head dropping in defeat. I was a parasite, feeding on his good nature and his hard work, and he was none the wiser. The thought made me feel powerful, untouchable. I was the puppet master, and David was my puppet. The winter winds of Dallas whipped around our large house, but inside, a coldness far more sinister was taking hold. David's frustration turned into a quiet desperation. He started taking on freelance work on top of his demanding job. He'd spend his evenings and weekends hunched over his laptop in the home office, the glow from the screen illuminating his weary face. I found it amusing, a pathetic display of a man trying to fill a hole I was digging deeper and deeper. "What's the point, David?" I'd ask, leaning against the doorframe, a glass of Chardonnay in my hand. "You're killing yourself, and for what? We're still struggling." He'd look up at me, his eyes clouded with confusion. I just don't understand, Sam. I've done the math 100 times. We should be fine. We should be comfortable. I'd just laugh. A short, sharp sound that held no warmth. Maybe your math is wrong, I'd say. Or maybe you're just not as good with money as you think you are. He'd go back to his screen, his shoulders slumping. He began to withdraw, his conversations becoming shorter, his smiles less frequent. The vibrant, optimistic man I had married was fading away, replaced by a shadow of his former self. His friends, our friends, started to notice. Is David okay? Our friend Sarah asked me one day during a lunch at a trendy new restaurant in Highland Park. He seemed so stressed. I just shrug, feigning indifference. He's fine. Just obsessed with work, I guess. You know how men are. I'd always blame him for our financial struggles, always subtly reminding him of his supposed failures. Look at Mark and Jessica, I'd say, referencing our neighbors who had just bought a new boat. Mark just got a promotion. He's really moving up. Maybe you should take a page out of his book. The comparisons were a constant weapon in my arsenal, designed to chip away at his self-esteem and make him more dependent on me. I wanted him to feel small, so that I could feel big. The cold, crisp air of a Dallas winter felt appropriate for the state of our marriage. It was beautiful on the outside, but frigid and unforgiving within. The breaking point was a small, seemingly insignificant thing. David's car, a modest sedan, was starting to have problems. The engine sputtered, and the check engine light was a constant beacon of mechanical distress. I knew he couldn't afford a new one, not with the money I was taking. I was secretly hoping he'd buy a new one, and I'd get to choose the model. But he decided to fix it instead, a decision that I found incredibly frustrating. We can't afford a new car right now, Sam, he said one morning, looking over an estimate from the mechanic. I'll just get this one repaired. Are you serious? I scoffed. You're going to drive that rust bucket around. What will people think? He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. It wasn't confusion or defeat. It was something akin to anger. I don't care what people think, Sam. I care about us, about our finances. We're in a hole right now, and I'm trying to dig us out. My heart hammered in my chest. This was a new side of him, a more defiant one. He was pushing back. Maybe if you stopped spending so much, we wouldn't be in this hole, he said, his voice low and dangerous. My carefully constructed facade began to crack. He was getting closer to the truth than I was comfortable with. I needed to regain control. I decided to escalate my manipulation. I started talking about the problem with his family and friends, framing myself as the victim. I just don't understand what's wrong with him, I'd say to his mother, my voice trembling with feigned sadness. He's so stressed, and he's so hard on himself. I was planting seeds of doubt and concern, ensuring that if he ever did figure out the truth, no one would believe him. The humid summer air of Dallas felt thick with unspoken lies and growing animosity. I was so caught up in my game, I failed to see the warning signs. The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage was now a crumbling edifice. Don't miss a beat of this intense drama. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for the next chapter. I felt a surge of power and a sense of invincibility. David was completely isolated. His friends were concerned, his family was worried, and he had no idea why. I had successfully turned everyone against him, painting him as an emotionally unstable man on the brink of a breakdown. The lies felt so real to me, a truth that I had created and now inhabited. I started to take more money. The smaller amounts weren't enough to sustain my lifestyle anymore. I needed more, much more. I was addicted to the thrill, to the rush of taking what I wanted without consequence. I justified my actions to myself, believing that I was simply taking what I was owed. After all, wasn't I the one who kept up the house and maintained our social life? Wasn't I the one who made us look good? The house was filled with a suffocating silence. David would come home, eat dinner alone, and disappear into his office. He was a ghost in his own home, a man defeated by an invisible enemy. I started to find notes he'd written to himself, a desperate attempt to make sense of the disappearing money. They were filled with calculations, budgets, and frantic questions. Where did the money go? Did I miss a payment? Am I losing my mind? Seeing his desperation gave me a dark, twisted pleasure. I was in complete control, and he was powerless. One night, I saw him sitting on the couch, staring at nothing, a tear rolling down his cheek. My heart clenched for a second. a fleeting moment of empathy. But then I remembered the purse I wanted, the trip I had planned, and the moment passed. He was just a means to an end. The summer heat of Dallas was sweltering, and the air conditioner was constantly running, but it did nothing to cool the icy atmosphere in our home. I was too busy planning my next shopping trip, my next lie, to notice the cracks in our foundation growing wider and wider. The game had stopped being fun and had become a necessity. I needed to keep taking to maintain the life I had built on a mountain of lies. The inevitable happened. The bank finally flagged the unusual activity on our account. I had been so confident, so reckless, that I hadn't considered the possibility of an audit. I was at the grocery store when my phone rang. It was David. His voice was cold, flat, and devoid of the confusion I had grown so used to hearing. "The bank called me, Sam," he said. My blood ran cold. "They said there's a problem with our direct deposit. They want to know why a portion of my paycheck has been going to a separate account for the past 2 years. I stood there, frozen, the sounds of the bustling grocery store fading into a distant hum. "Who is Samantha Reed?" he asked. My heart stopped. I had used a different version of my name to create the secret account, thinking it would be enough to throw off anyone who checked. It was a foolish mistake. A single pathetic detail I had overlooked in my arrogance. "I don't know what you're talking about, David," I lied, my voice shaking. "It must be some kind of mistake." "Don't lie to me, Sam," he said, and for the first time I felt true fear. "The account is in the name of Samantha Reed, and the address is the same as ours. The bank sent me all the statements. I've seen everything. The money you took, the things you bought, all of it. The truth was out. There was no hiding, no more lies to tell. The intricate web of deception I had woven had finally unraveled. I hung up the phone and walked out of the store, leaving my shopping cart behind. The world seemed to be closing in on me. The sun was setting over the Dallas skyline, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red, but all I could feel was a deep, bone-chilling cold. The perfect life I had so carefully crafted was gone, shattered into a million pieces. The reality of my actions hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I had not only stolen from my husband, but I had also stolen his peace of mind, his trust, and his dignity. I had destroyed him, all for the sake of a few fleeting moments of luxury. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I was no longer the puppet master. I was the one whose strings had been cut. I walked into the house, and the silence was deafening. David was sitting on the couch. The dining room table was littered with bank statements and receipts, evidence of my crimes. His face was a mask of betrayal, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it was almost unbearable to look at. "How could you, Sam?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "I trusted you. I loved you." His words were like daggers, each one piercing my carefully constructed armor. I had no defense, no lies left to tell. The truth was ugly, and it was mine to own. I wanted more, David," I stammered, my voice cracking. "I felt like I was entitled to it. You never gave me the life I wanted." "I gave you my life, Sam," he said, and his voice broke. "I gave you everything. I worked myself to the bone. I spent every waking moment trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. You mocked me, you humiliated me, you told our friends and family I was a failure. All of it. For this?" He gestured to the pile of receipts. There were designer clothes, expensive jewelry, vacations, and a down payment on a luxury car I had been planning to buy for myself. The evidence was irrefutable, and my shame was overwhelming. "I'm sorry," I said, a tear finally falling down my cheek. "I'm so sorry, David." "Sorry doesn't fix this, Sam," he said, standing up. "It doesn't fix the sleepless nights. It doesn't fix the constant stress I've been under. It doesn't fix the way you made me feel. You didn't just take my money, you took my sanity." He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my lies and my failures. The house, which had once felt like my kingdom, now felt like a prison. The luxury items I had acquired now felt like a burden, a physical manifestation of my greed and my moral bankruptcy. The warm air of the Texas night felt suffocating. I had gotten what I wanted, but at what cost? I had traded a loving, trusting partner for a pile of worthless things. This story is far from over. Subscribe now and stay tuned for the final chapters and a dramatic conclusion. The next few days were a blur of coldness and silence. David moved into the guest room, and our conversations were limited to the bare minimum. He was a stranger in his own home, and I was a pariah. The perfect life I had meticulously curated was a pile of ashes, and I was the one who had set the fire. My friends, the ones I had flaunted my new purchases to, started to distance themselves. I called Sarah, but her voice was cold and distant. "I can't talk to you right now, Sam," she said. "David told us everything. I can't believe you would do that to him." The guilt was a heavy weight on my shoulders, a constant physical ache. I had not only betrayed my husband, but I had also alienated myself from the people I considered my friends. I started to sell the things I had bought with David's money. The expensive clothes, the designer bags, the jewelry. Each one was a painful reminder of my selfishness. I had to pay him back, to try and atone for my sins. But the money I had stolen was a drop in the ocean compared to the damage I had done. He didn't want the money back. He wanted the trust I had so carelessly shattered. He wanted the man he used to be, the man I had systematically destroyed. I was alone, truly and utterly alone, in a house filled with things I no longer wanted, and a husband who no longer saw me as his wife. The beautiful Dallas skyline, which I had once seen as a testament to my success, now felt like a taunting reminder of how far I had fallen. I tried to talk to him, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but he wouldn't listen. His silence was louder than any scream, his absence a constant, painful presence. I had spent so much time convincing him he was a failure that he had started to believe it, and now, even in the face of the truth, he was still recovering from the psychological damage I had inflicted. I had won the battle, but I had lost the war. The final blow came in the form of an envelope, delivered by a messenger. The papers were a legal document. Divorce papers. My heart sank, but I couldn't be surprised. This was the natural and deserved consequence of my actions. I had lost everything. My marriage, my friends, my reputation. The house would be sold, the money divided, and I would be left with nothing but the shame and the painful memories of my greed. David had moved out, and the house felt emptier than it ever had before. The silence was suffocating, and the echoes of our past were a constant, tormenting presence. I walked through the empty rooms, remembering the moments of manufactured happiness, the dinner parties I had hosted, the lies I had told, the way I had watched David struggle while I reveled in my secret success. I saw a life I could have had, a life built on love and trust, and a life that I had so recklessly thrown away. The humid summer air of Dallas felt heavy, oppressive, a fitting atmosphere for the dark days I was now living. I was a cautionary tale, a testament to the destructive power of greed and selfishness. I had started a war with my own husband and had lost everything in the process. I had mocked him as broke, and in the end, I was the one who was truly bankrupt, not in money, but in spirit and in love. I sat on the couch in the empty living room, the divorce papers on the table, and for the first time in a very long time, I cried. Not for the things I had lost, but for the person I had become. The person I had once been was gone, replaced by a monster of my own creation. I had to face the consequences alone, without a husband, without a friend, without a single person to turn to. I was finally truly broke, and it was a pain I deserved. The divorce was finalized quietly, and the house was sold. The money from the sale was divided, and David moved on, a free man, finally able to rebuild his life. I took my share and moved into a small rented apartment in a less glamorous part of town. The transition was jarring. No more designer handbags, no more fancy dinners, no more extravagant vacations. I was just Samantha, a woman who had lost it all because she wanted too much. The world I had built was gone, and the real world was a cold, harsh place. I started working again, a job I had not needed for years. The long hours, the mundane tasks, the struggle to make ends meet. It was all a painful reminder of what I had put David through. I was living the life I had so despised, a life of hard work and meager pay, a life without the easy luxuries I had grown so accustomed to. I would often see David on social media, living his life to the fullest. With a new partner, he looked happy, genuinely happy. Something I had not seen on his face in years. He was thriving, and I was barely surviving. The irony was not lost on me. One day, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop. She saw me and her face hardened, but she didn't look away. I saw a flicker of the old compassion in her eyes. "How are you, Sam?" she asked, her voice cautious. "I'm okay," I said, a small, sad smile on my face. "I'm paying for my mistakes." She just nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and understanding. "I hope you find peace," she said, and then she walked away. Her words were a small light in the darkness. They were a sign that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to move forward, to find some kind of redemption. I had spent my life building a false empire, only to see it crumble before my eyes. I had mocked my husband as broke, but in the end, it was my life that was shattered into a million pieces. The beautiful, sparkling city of Dallas was no longer my playground. It was a place of ghosts, a city of memories filled with the echoes of a life I had foolishly destroyed. The lesson I learned was a painful one. True wealth isn't measured in money or possessions, but in the love, trust, and happiness we share with the people we care about. And for me, that was a treasure I had so carelessly thrown away.